On this episode, we talk about the most popular thing that I've been asked about in the last year, and that is, how do I get over a mental block?
Welcome to the Hit Zero podcast, where our goal is to build better cheer athletes.
So there are two things we have to think about when it comes to a mental block in anything, really, not just cheerleading, but anything that we want to accomplish, either in our life, day to day, and things of that nature. And number one is probably the hardest part to understand, and therefore is going to take us the least amount of time to talk about, and that's why. There are professionals out there, sports psychologists, whose sole job is to help an athlete to determine why do they have a block on something that they should be able to do, something they've already done, or something that they should have no issue achieving as they continue with their progress in their sport. A lot of this, big teams like your baseball teams, football teams, hockey teams, these guys have sports psychologists on site, and one of their primary roles is to address athletes' fear when returning to play from something like a serious injury. So take, for instance, an ACL tear in a running back on an NFL team. A lot of times these guys will have all the injury is resolved. They've had the best PT, and their follow-up imaging and everything looks perfect. They're pristine. But they can't perform at the same level they did prior to that injury. And so when we look at this athlete, we see mechanically they're perfectly sound. No injuries there. They're actually a lot of times stronger after their surgical procedure and their PT than they ever were before, but yet there's still something in their mind that will not allow them to perform at the level they previously could or that they should be able to. And so when it comes to the why do we have that mental block, we could literally talk ad nauseum for years, nonstop, trying to determine the specific cause for why an athlete would not perform an activity. And it could be something as simple as, I did this activity and it hurt and I don't want to do it. Very simple. But it also could be something as complex as, last Tuesday before cheer practice, I tied my shoe too tight, my foot didn't feel well, and I didn't really comprehend that that's what was bothering me, but in the back of my mind, my foot didn't feel good, and we were working on handsprings a lot that day, and then we did a ton of handsprings, and then my foot didn't feel good, and then now a month later, the only thing in the back of my mind I can think of is that my foot hurts when I do back handsprings. It becomes so convoluted that in order to determine a why, you have to have someone trained to peel back all of the layers. Now, if you can sit down with your athlete, if it's your kid, or if it's, if you're a coach, if you're able to sit down and find a big cause of why this athlete may have a mental block, then, utilize that time and try to overcome that deficiency or that mental block if it's that simple. But keep in mind that most athletes have mental blocks that have nothing to do with anything that happened in the gym, anything that's happened skill-wise. It could be something completely detached from cheer. And so instead of focusing on why they have this deficiency or why they're unable to reach this goal or perform a skill that they may have done 1,000 times, our goal should be, how do we fix it? Let's not worry about why. Let's just worry about what to do about it. And that's one thing that can be organized and simplified across the board. The one thing we can start with that's the simplest approach is going to be to take whatever skill that athlete is struggling with and take it back. Go back down our regression pathway or progression pathway to the next skill that they're fully comfortable with. So for instance, if we're working on an athlete that's working on a back handspring tuck and they're freaking out about the tuck, my number one thing would be go back to multiple back handsprings. And that's it. And tell that athlete, and if you're an athlete listening, in your mind you tell yourself, you're not allowed to do anything more than multiple handsprings. And you'll do that and rewire your thought process to be that handsprings become so easy that you're only eager to perform the next skill, which would be your tuck. There's a life coach that's very well known for some of the parents and some of their older listeners. His name's Tony Robbins. And one of the things I love about Tony Robbins, among many, I've read most of his books and listened to most of his even back in the day when he had cassettes and CDs, listened to those. But Tony has an idea, he teaches that people do things for one of two reasons. You're either working towards something that's pleasurable or something that makes you happy, or you're avoiding something that makes you sad or you're fearful of. So if we look at these principles, we can dial that into exactly the same thing in cheer. If an athlete has one of two things, they're either working away from something they're scared of, or they're working towards something that they know will make themselves happy. And so if we have an athlete that's fearful of something, they're avoiding, or if we have a mental block, they're avoiding something they want to stay away from, we can replace that mindset with something that they're eager to achieve. So instead of working away, we work toward. And the way we do that is we take this athlete back and say, hey, look, you're working on a tuck, or you have a tuck, but for some reason, we can't get it here. That's fine. Let's take a step back to what you're 100% comfortable with and you're willing to do all day, every day. Let's do that until you get so sick of doing it that you're eager to reach that next skill level again. That would be happy. It would create happiness in your heart and in your mind as an athlete to achieve that thing again. So instead of our athletes working away from a skill that they're scared of, we now switch their mindset to where they're eager to work towards that skill. And because they've already done it, the ability to reacquire that skill happens in an instant. So one step back can actually give us a couple steps forward. Other things that we can do when an athlete has a mental block is, let's say that we do take those steps back and they're able to perform that skill, but they still won't make the leap. We'll take the skill they're working on and break it down into its parts and work the individual parts so that you reaffirm to that athlete each of these individual components of this skill you're talented in, you're capable of performing well, and combined will create a good skill. So let's say if it's a tuck, for instance, we've talked about the 3 parts of a tuck: set, tuck or our pull, and the landing. So if we're working on a tuck with an athlete that already has a tuck, maybe we just need to reintroduce them to the components and say, hey, look how high your set is. You've got more height than anyone else in the gym. Look how strong your pull is. You rotate super tight, super fast. And look how confidently you land. Feet are flat, chest is up. Very, very safe. And by breaking it down into these components, we're able to show athletes that if you can perform all 3 of these pieces together, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to perform it as a whole. Because with most skills in cheer, the sum is greater than the parts. A set, a pull, and a landing sounds boring. But if you watch someone throw a perfect tuck, it's beautiful. It's like symphony in motion. So breaking down movements into their individual pieces is a great way to then build that confidence piece by piece. So instead of asking an athlete throw a tuck, they're going to be asking you to tuck because they're tired of performing every one of those components perfectly. And these are just a couple of things that we can use with our athletes when they struggle. But the biggest thing is that instead of focusing on what do I have to do to get this athlete, why are they having this mental block? Why can they not do these things? That stresses you out as a coach and as a parent. And it stresses your athlete and your kid out more than you could ever imagine. Because trust me, as much as you want them to hit that skill, they want to hit it too. I've been there. I've had skills that I could throw at a moment's notice. And for some reason, while working on a layout or a full, I all of a sudden couldn't throw a round off back handspring. And that's just, it happens. We have bad days, we have bad weeks, we have bad months, we have bad seasons. But the more you push your kid or your athlete to try to figure out why do we have this mental block, the more it stresses them out, because then they start to wonder, why do I have this mental block? And they become so inwardly focused that they can't get out of that space. So instead of focusing on the skill, they're focusing on what's wrong with me. Why am I broken? Why can I not do what I've always been able to do? And that is a terrible place for an athlete to be. So I hope that we can take these couple of things and look at any athlete. If you're an athlete, look at these suggestions and take a step back. If you're a coach or a parent, recognize that mental blocks are not specific to cheer. The fact that your kid has a mental block doing a handspring doesn't make them special. And I say that in the most loving way. Because across the board, all athletes in every sport have mental blocks at some point. And the only thing we can do is provide support and options for our athletes to try to get to a better mental place. Instead of trying to find out why they have it, let's just provide whatever they need to overcome it themselves. Hope this was beneficial. If you guys have a mental block, or if you have an athlete that has a mental block, something that they're working on, something they can't get over, share this podcast with them. Sit down. If you're a parent or a coach, sit down with your athlete. Let them know that you're there to support them and that you have plans and ideas to help guide them through this difficult time. They will get through it, I promise. With the right support and the right plan, you can overcome anything. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us. Be sure to check out thecheerdoc.com for more content. Also, if you found the material today valuable, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. It's very much appreciated. Thanks for listening and have an incredible day.